I'm Eliza Wood, this is my channel, and let's talk about making clothes for other people. So thus far, I've only ever made clothes for myself. I have never once made anything for any other person in any way, shape, or form. Which makes my life easier because I will always have the model here and ready to try things on if I need them to. But it's not my end goal. I would like to be able to make costumes for many different people, because if I just make them for myself, I'm limited by how often I can wear everything. And the more people I make for, the more practice I get and the faster I get, and it's a whole circle. And in the last couple of months, my cousin has been asking me for a princess dress, and you know how much I love to make Christmas dresses. So what better time to challenge myself than now? And of course, I have to make my life really difficult and decide to make a costume for MegaCon in February, and it's currently January. So anybody who's surprised by that, raise your hand, because I am crazy and don't know how deadlines work. But I don't yet feel confident in my ability to make somebody else something, especially because this one is particularly challenging since she lives in an entirely different state. And due to the short deadline, I do not have enough time to send her things and have her send them back after trying them on. So this is entirely guesswork and trying to do whatever I can to make these things fit her without actually being able to try them on her. And I don't quite feel ready yet to do a full-blown gown. So instead of doing just the gown, I'm going to start with a coat and then I'll do the gown. Because you know that makes life easier to, instead of doing one thing in a deadline, do two. But that's enough of that. Let's get to what y'all were actually here for, and that is Swan Princess. So my cousin has actually been asking me for a princess dress. She had two options, of which I only know one of the creations. So I was like, let's go with that one. That way I have some experience with it and I can look some of the stuff up and all that stuff. And that one is the Swan Princess Odette. And of course, whenever you're going to do any sort of project, you have to do a whole bunch of research. And while I was doing that, I found a few pictures where Odette is wearing a cloak. She wears it when she's riding a horse. She wears it at the end of the "This Isn't My Idea of Fun" song. So there are a few times when she wears this red coat. And my cousin is one of those people who gets cold very easily, so I thought this would be a good project to get started with because it doesn't have to be well fitted. In fact, it's not supposed to be well fitted. She's gonna get multiple uses out of it, more than just being a Swan Princess coat that she has to wear for this one cosplay, and I get my feet wet on making something for somebody else. So now we have a plan. We're gonna do the coat first, but I need to have some fabric. For the coat, I wanted something that looked luxurious, but also would be warm. Unfortunately, the really only thing I could think of that fit that sort of mold would be velvet, and I had already planned on putting velvet on the gown. I didn't want to repeat the same fabric on the coat. So what I wound up actually doing is just going to Joann's and finding a fabric that was close enough to the original color that I was happy with it. And I wound up finding this beautiful suede, fake suede of course, but a beautiful suede fabric that I thought would be perfect. Unfortunately, it is an upholstery fabric, which means it's a lot thicker and stiffer than a normal fabric would be, which I thought that would be fine because it would keep its volume, which I thought would look nice. I'm pretty sure they would not have made cloaks out of suede, at least in the medieval times. I don't even know if they used suede in the medieval times, which is kind of when I was thinking this movie would have taken place. But I'm kind of making this coat up off the cuff, so I'm okay with making it not historically accurate, unlike my normal projects where I try to get as historically accurate as possible while still maintaining the movie. This one is I didn't have any really good pictures to completely recreate it, and so I am honestly just making it up as I go along, so I'm okay with making everything up, including fabric choices. So my cousin, who lives in a different state from me, I had originally planned on taking her measurements while she was down here for Christmas, but some things happened and she had to cancel her travel. So I had to get her to take the measurements, and she had a whole thing where she had to go get somebody to get her help, and so it took a few days for her to get her measurements, which is totally understandable. However, I forgot to ask for a couple of things, so I didn't have all of the measurements that I really needed. So I'm having to get a bit creative on how to get the measurements that I'm missing. I don't know if you can hear those crickets in the background. I've got the window open because it's nice and cool today, and they're very loud. I have, back up so you can see it, this mannequin, and I've had this mannequin for a while. I had been using it. I had created a mannequin, a fabric mannequin that fit me, but of course at that time I guess I was at my biggest, so immediately after I made it, it no longer fit me. So I've never really used it all that much, and just recently the base broke on it. I have this mannequin, which is an adjustable mannequin, and I have inputted the measurements that my cousin was able to get me into my adjustable mannequin, and the measurements that I'm missing I'm taking from this mannequin. It's gonna be kind of guesswork, averages, stuff like that, but I'm hoping it'll still fit her well enough that it won't be too noticeable that I don't have exact measurements from her. But also the fact that I have this means that I can actually try a mock-up on something, even if it won't be her. After I have all the measurements I need, it's time to make a bodice block for her. Unfortunately, the bodice blocks that I prefer to make using historical methods require a whole heck of a lot more measurements, but I can find some good modern bodice patterns online. I'll be linking the method I use down below. And luckily, my cousin will not require anything like a full bust adjustment, since I still can't figure out that magic anyway. Since it's right after Christmas, I'm just using some leftover wrapping paper to draw out my pattern. I started on the white side in hopes that you would be able to see what I'm doing, but then realized I made a mistake, so switched to the pattern side to redraw the whole thing. Then I'll just need to cut out the bodice block and use it to make any of my other patterns that I need. I didn't film it, but I wound up just closing the dart at the top of the front and then copying the pattern all the way around without including the darts at the bottom for the coat pattern. So I've made 4 technically patterns for my cousin. The first one being a general overall bodice block, and then I've made one for the coat, one for the undergarment, and one for the dress, which will be the next video. But for now, I need to work on the coat just to get them out of the way because they're going to be super simple. I am a little concerned. Based on the paper patterns, I think I messed up the shoulder. I think it's gonna be too, I think it's gonna point in that direction rather than sitting lower. I don't know how that happened, but this is all based on the paper pattern. So what I need to do is make a mock-up, but I don't have enough fabric for it. I can't afford to go get more, so I'm having to do something that I know everybody's gonna be a little concerned about. I'm having to actually just sew the pieces together and edit them as I go. And this is especially hard because I do not have the cousin here to transfer these things onto, and I can't try them on her because I don't have enough time to send them off to her and have her send them back, and so on and so forth. So what I'm gonna do is sew at least the coat. If I can get the coat at least together, that I don't think it will be the end of the world if the shoulder is off. And if the shoulder points out like this, I can just cut it short and then have it go down like that. As long as that fits, and whatever alteration I do to that, I can then put on the dress, and then I won't have to worry about it on the dress. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do the coat first, which is funny because I'm doing the outerwear very first thing is the outerwear. So I'm gonna do the coat first and see how that works and move on from there. Originally, I decided to combine the front and back pattern pieces and cut on the fold so that the body of the coat would only have seams in the shoulder. But that made it look like a tube, which looked absolutely horrible, and I absolutely despised it. It did, however, show me that the armhole and the shoulder were completely wrong. So it was back to the bodice block I went. It was only at this point that I realized I could hold my paper pattern up to the mannequin to make any necessary adjustments. For the front, I wound up making the armhole bigger, and for the back, I actually had to add some length to the shoulder. After altering the patterns, I decided to cut the front and back separately and then just have it kind of go out for the skirt on both sides of each pattern piece. Of course, by this point, I was so frustrated by the process that I forgot to turn on my camera. After that, it's to the machine to sew my 1/2 inch seam allowance. I originally started out holding my pieces together using pins, but suede fabric doesn't heal well from pin pricks, and the upholstery fabric made it a pain to put the pins in. So eventually I moved to using clips. So I had a late night at work today, and I'm currently changing into pajamas so that I can be comfortable while I work on cosplay. But I figured before I go into looking like a gremlin, I should probably at least talk to the camera for a minute. So right now the coat is all put together. I still have to remake all of my patterns because I added on to the shoulder. And the sleeve needs to be made. I've been putting off the sleeve because I hate sleeves, but the intention of the sleeve is to gather it into the armhole, so as long as it's not too small, I don't mind what size it is. But I also can't make it too big because this particular fabric doesn't gather well. So when it comes to the dress, I can have real big sleeves. It needs to be real big sleeves. But for the coat, it needs to be about the right size. So I've been putting it off because guess what I did not ask my cousin to get on measurements? The circumference of her arm. So I'm probably just gonna have to guess. I know that she's skinnier than me, so probably take my measurements and then make them smaller. Luckily, as long as the shoulder fits, everything else can be wider, because nothing is supposed to be form-fitting except the sleeves are gonna be wrapped tight using like some sort of straps. I haven't decided yet if I want those straps to be tied on the day of or if I want to sew them on. But either way, they will probably be the last thing I put on, and I will probably do it while I have my cousin here so that I can measure them to her actual like circumference and make sure that they fit her correctly. So really all I'm doing right now is putting off trying to make the arm sleeve pattern. I don't like doing it. I hate sleeves. It's better than pants at least, but I don't want to do it.
That's not what you're doing.
But now I'm going to go get into gremlin attire so that I can work on, one thing though, I don't have a lot of fabric left. Because of my blunder with trying to make the body of the coat all one piece and then it looking like a tube and it looked horrible, I didn't do a great job of saving fabric for the sleeves, so I don't have a lot left. I'm hoping that whatever sleeve pattern that I make up will fit in the small amount of fabric that I have left, but we will see. Anyway, let me go get into some gremlin attire so that I can work more comfortably and actually get some work done. And also apparently my camera has decided that it's dying, so there's that. So I did make a sleeve pattern, but honestly, it was a lot of guesswork and I don't even really feel like I did it correctly. So I'll link the tutorial that I used to make the pattern down below, but I really didn't feel like it was gonna do anybody any good to film that bumbling process of me trying to make a sleeve. The sleeves that I want to make actually have an opening in the front. So once the pattern was done, I cut the front half down the middle and taped it to the back half. Then I copied only the shoulder bit on the fabric with a seam allowance and drew a sleeve using whatever was left on the fabric that I could. So I'm really annoyed. I got a couple years back these like amazing feet for my sewing machine, but they don't actually fit on my sewing machine. Like if I try to use them, the needle hits the foot and then breaks, and it's really irritating because I can't use like 3/4 of the feet that I got on this totally awesome set of feet with this sewing machine, and it's a pain in the butt to get a new sewing machine. So I was trying to think of a way to fix it. I pulled apart my sewing machine. I tried to move the needle and foot farther apart by pulling apart my sewing machine, and that didn't work. And then I tried to mess with the shank to move the foot farther back on the shank, but I think I broke it. So now I can't use my sewing machine, and the earliest I can get a new shank is 2 days from now. So now I have to wait for a new shank to come in the mail, and I still can't use my totally awesome feet for the sewing machine. I'm really annoyed because now I'm delayed for 2 reasons, one of which is my fault and the other of which is that I can't use the feet that would have made my life easier. So irritating. At the very least, while I'm waiting for that shank to come in, I can cut the lining for the sleeve. I don't actually know what this fabric is since it was just chilling in my stash, but it happened to be the perfect color to match the wrong side of the suede, so it won't be as noticeable that I don't have enough to line the body of the coat. Then my shank came in, finally, so I was able to sew the lining of the sleeve. It was supposed to be a 1/2-inch seam, but you may have noticed that my needle is off center. That's because the shank lines my foot up differently than the old one did, and I didn't notice until I was more than halfway through. Although, this might mean that those other feet I was complaining about might fit now. Ooh. Anyway, then I turned the fabric around and clipped it together. The one thing I forgot to do at this point is clip the curves, which will cause issues later. Then I'll sew as close to the edges as I can to flatten my seams. I probably could have just ironed it, but I was afraid that the thick suede would not take the iron well and wouldn't crease where I'd need it to, so tacking it down was the better option. But I also didn't want the machine sewing to be visible on the outside of the coat, so I turned the hem over the lining and tacked it down by hand. I honestly have no idea what the name of this stitch is because I was making it up as I was going along, but it's a mix of a ladder stitch and a back stitch because I wanted to only have to grab the lining fabric while stitching, but still have enough strength to hold the suede down. Then I very slowly attached the sleeve to the body of the coat. I knew it was going to happen, but I did have a problem where the sleeve was way too big to fit the armhole. Usually I would just gather it down to fit, but I honestly did not want to try to get that thick suede to gather. So I just overlapped the front bits where it was going to be open anyway. Once the sleeve was on the coat, I noticed how absolutely horrible the turned over hem looked. The sides were fine, but the bottom of the sleeve actually buckled a lot. I think it's because I neglected to clip the curves before turning over the first time, and it was all buckly and it looked ugly. I couldn't do it. I couldn't leave it like that. So, despite my every desire not to have visible stitching on the outside of the coat, I undid all that hand stitching. This mug is totally empty, but I'm working on my aesthetics, so I figured I'd hold on to it. So, the coat is coming along. It's almost done, but I'm struggling with the neckline. I cannot decide what to do with the neckline. Logically, I feel like it would make sense for it to be a hood on the neckline, but her hair's always down, so you can't really see anything that would suggest a hood. Like, there's no bulkiness in the back of her hair that would suggest there's a hood underneath it, but her hair is also wavy, so that could be disguising something that might be a hood. And I'm not sure that the fabric will be soft enough to, or flowy enough to actually do a hood. Because if I were to do a hood, I wouldn't be able to just do it out of the lining fabric. It would look weird. So I would want I would want it to be the suede. I think the suede is just too stiff to really do a hood that would collapse in the way that the neckline does of that coat. So there's the option of the hood if I even have enough fabric, which I'm not even sure I have enough fabric. Or there's the option of just doing some sort of gathered neckline, but I don't actually know how I would do that or how it would look. It feels like an unnecessary neckline if it's not a hood. So I'm just very, very confused right now, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm gonna do about it. Oh, also, you know those stitches that I worked real hard to do the hand stitching on the sleeves? I've pulled it all out. I actually found that it looked neater when the sleeves were not folded over like that. The rounded edges did this like buckling kind of thing that looked weird. It was nice that it pulled the sleeve open, but it just didn't look right to me, and it just wasn't sitting in the way that I wanted it to. So I just decided to pull it out entirely, and now it sits a little bit more flat on the sleeve, but that's just how it's gonna be, because it looked ugly the way that it was before on the coat. It just looked real buckly and ugly, and I did not like it. So I just wound up taking it out, which unfortunately means that there will be visible stitching on the outside of the coat for the sleeves, and if I do the hood, it will be also on the hood because I want the hood to be lined in the same way. So we shall see how that goes. After doing a bit of research, I think I have just enough suede left from the earlier blunder of the body piece that I can make a hood, only to have my camera probably die on me. But this is what the pattern looks like, and the tutorial will be linked below. I was also just barely able to scrounge up enough fabric to line the hood, which was a necessity for this particular piece anyway. Then I'll sew up the top of both pieces and combine them in the same way as I did with the sleeves, and attach that to the neckline of the coat. The hood's neckline was slightly bigger than that of the coat, but just barely enough that I could do a tiny bit of gathering at the center back for it not to be noticeable. Last but not least, I need a ribbon. With the last vestiges of the lining fabric, I cut out a 5-inch strip of fabric. This will be folded and sewed in half to make about a 2-inch strip after you remove the seam allowance and turn it out. Then I hand sewed it to the coat just below the neckline. Not that you can see that because this is a horrible angle, but that is the final step. It's done! Unfortunately, I can't wear it because it's too small for me, and my cousin isn't here to model it, so I'll just have to show you some pictures of the coat as it is completed. But I am really happy with it. I feel like I say that like every single video at the end of it, except maybe once when I was like, I hate it. There are some things that didn't go to plan, mainly the sleeves. I wish I had had a little bit more fabric in order to give them more volume at the bottom. That kind of sleeve is generally, it actually expands at the bottom even though it's circular. It gets bigger at the bottom, but I did not have enough fabric to allow for that, so it was just a straight shot down, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. So I wish I had more fabric for the sleeves. It's not the end of the world. I also am not super happy with the fact that there's visible stitching on the outside of the sleeves and on the outside of the hood, but again, it is what it is. It's how it's gonna be in order to make it look like it did in the pictures. The hood is actually lying relatively flat, which I'm a little surprised by. I think it might be It won't be hidden by my cousin's hair because her hair, she would need to have extensions and stuff in her hair to make it as voluminous as Odette, but it would probably be covered if you had as much hair as Odette and as voluminous as hers. So I am happy with that. The bow looks super cute. I'm still slightly concerned about the sizing. It fits on my mannequin, which I made my mannequin the size, I think, of my cousin, but again, I didn't actually have any ability to compare, and I'm going off of her measurements, and she's not absolutely certain that she got her measurements right because she's never done them before, and honestly, I don't even know if I'd be able to do them right because I still can't even do my own right. And then the last thing, which is an unfortunate circumstance, but it is what it is the lining. I really wish I could have lined the entire coat with the lining. I only had enough to line the sleeves and the hood and the bow, create the bow. The actual coat is not lined at all. It's almost the same color as the lining, so unless you were like actually paying attention, you wouldn't notice there's no lining. But around like the collar and the armholes, it looks a bit messy because there's nothing to cover the seams, especially around the neck hole. You can't see the armholes, but the neck hole can sometimes be visible if the hood is pulled back in such a way. Still though, I'm really happy with it. I think it looks as close to the Odette coat as I could get with the minimal amount of pictures that I could find. So that's completed, and now I have to actually do the Odette gown. That'll be hopefully the next video. I have until February 8th, I believe, to complete the gown. So that is going to be the very next thing that I do. I'm hoping to finish it long before then. So if you're at all curious to see how I do the gown, I would love for you to join me in the next video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns about the coat, please let me know in the comments below. And if you liked this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Bye!